Hello and welcome to HPR. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us. In this segment, we'll be talking with Dr. Colby Kash. Dr. Kash is a wellness and longevity functional medicine practitioner, a sought-after lecturer on healthcare-related topics, and co-founder of 5 biotechnology companies. He's joining us to talk about his book, The Autoimmune Plague: How to Regain Your Sovereignty Over Your Body and Life. He's also going to talk a bit about the development of the KASH Code. Welcome to HPR, Dr. Colby Kash. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Neil. Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here.
Tell us a bit about yourself, if you would, and then let's talk about this book.
Sure. So I've always had a passion for health and wellness as a young athlete, but one thing that always plagued me was my gut issues and gut pain that always seemed to, be in the background of my life, and I had a plan around it. It sort of progressed as I got older and eventually developed into an autoimmune disease known as Crohn's disease, where your immune system essentially attacks your digestive tract. And this leads to lots of blood in your stools, pain. It could be quite crippling at times. And so, aside from Crohn's, I had 2 other autoimmune diseases, psoriasis and inflammatory arthritis. None of them a lot of fun. And when I started researching why my body was going through this, and then some of my professional studies as well, I saw that 1 in 7 Americans now have an autoimmune disease, 1 in 5 women, up from multitudes from generations before. And when you look around the world, there's dozens and dozens of populations where autoimmune disease was completely devoid until they imported a Western diet and lifestyle. And within a generation or 2, they started to see the same autoimmune numbers that we have here in the States.
Your book is the result of what you were just describing, your own personal health journey. You were trying to find, I guess, the root cause of disease. Can you tell us a little bit more about this book, why you wrote it?
Right. When you think about the root cause, it's really the question why. Why is it happening? Is this a normal state for humans? Are humans supposed to have their immune systems fall out of homeostasis and attack their own bodies? There's probably something very wrong in the environment there. And so when I talk about the root cause, what are we doing now in this environment that was different than the environment that we genetically evolved and adapted to live in? Well, I think the biggest difference is the food that we're putting in our body. We're consuming foods that didn't exist prior to the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in the archaeological record, when humans shifted over from a predominantly animal-based diet into agriculture, is when you see in the record that humans shrunk in stature. We got cavities, bone lesions, our brains even shrunk. You were able to feed more mouths, so the population increased, but we were thriving less. And after the agricultural revolution, you fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, where it started to mass produce white flour, vegetable oils, and then now in modern times, with food science, you have many new chemicals and pesticides that are put into our foods that ultimately break down the gut barrier in our bodies and lead to the inflammatory cascade.
Now, as far as the foods that we're putting into our bodies, you said that this shift, this agricultural revolution caused this shift in what we eat. Are there any foods that are, actually good for us? What food should we have in our homes and be included in our diets, and what food shouldn't? Because it seems to be a daunting task just to separate the good from the bad.
It definitely is, Neil. And there's a lot of confusion out there because one expert says one thing and another expert says something else. So that's why I love to always just look at evolution, because evolution doesn't have an agenda per se. So people come from different and diverse backgrounds where their ancestors adapted to different environments. There was this dentist by the name of Dr. Weston A. Price in the 1940s that went all over the world and stayed with dozens of indigenous tribes to study their dentition. And he studied the Eskimos in Alaska, who their predominant diet was whale and seal blubber. He went to the Aboriginals in Australia and saw that they consumed high amounts of reptiles and insects. And then there was the Maasai tribe in Africa that lived off of their herds and mostly consumed raw milk and the blood and meat of their animals. And they were all completely devoid of cavities, did not exist, and a lot of the inflammatory disorders that we now deal with in the West. And so there's a certain amount of biochemical individuality between humans and our backgrounds, where maybe we're able to consume different foods and we had different amounts of enzymes to break down those foods. But the number one commonality between all these groups is they consume foods that are evolutionarily consistent with our biology. Compared to if you go to the store now, a lot of the foods need factories to make them and change the structure. And it could be quite confusing for our immune systems when we're consuming foods that have a lot of different chemicals in it. So I think although it's a very individual basis, one food could be a superfood for me, but it could be rather provocative for your immune system, that you could go on an individual journey to see what your body is able to deal with the best.
Well, let's talk a bit about the microbiome. What is the microbiome? How do you keep it healthy? And can you heal a damaged microbiome?
It's a great question. We like to have more bacteria in our body than even human cells. And bacteria are what make up our microbiome. They're all over us and within us. And the microbiome produces chemical signals that attach to the cell receptors on every cell in the human body. So if you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, which is caused by a broken down gut, the bacteria could be sending inflammatory signals to all the cells and literally changes gene expression. And it could turn on genes for disease. It could also, the chemical signals could cross the blood-brain barrier, causing inflammation in the brain. So your inflamed gut could be linked to your anxiety and depression and insomnia, which goes even secondary to autoimmune disease. But there is a lot you could do to turn around an inflamed gut and a bad microbiome. Number one is the elimination diet, which is getting rid of different food groups, the individual aspect of all of this. And then there's different supplements called prebiotics, which is like food for the good bacteria. There is postbiotics, which is a little bit like an excretion of some of the bacteria in your gut, generally good bacteria. But if you're deficient in the good bacteria, you could supplement with the postbiotic, and it is used as fuel for your gut lining and decreases the inflammation. But the most research supports consuming fermented foods, which is a diverse amount of bacteria, prebiotics, and postbiotics all in one that could help change the profile of your microbiome back to homeostasis. And this includes things like fermented sauerkraut and kimchi, fermented pickles, and stuff like that.
Well, Doctor, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Lots of intriguing information. Your book, The Autoimmune Plague, How to Regain Sovereignty Over Your Body and Life. Where can our listeners get a copy of your book? And is there any website that you'd like to give us that listeners can go and learn more about the microbiome and your book as well?
Sure. So it's on Amazon, but if you go to the autoimmuneplague.com or autoimmuneplague.com, you can download the first chapter for free to get an inside look on the book.
Dr. Kash, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on HPR.
Thank you very much, Neil.
You've been listening to HPR. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Colby Kash. Join us at www.hpr.fm. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/HPR.